Thank you, everybody. And on behalf of the Los Angeles County Economic Development Corporation, welcome and thank you all for joining us for this Future Forum, the Future of Professional Sports in Los Angeles County, a special showcase presented by California State University Dominguez Hills. My name is Shane Cullen, and I am the Event Programs Manager for the LAEDC and will be your Zoom tech for today. We have a star-studded program of presenters and panelists who will be sharing their insights with you today. We'll be sending you all relevant links later this week, including a link to the webinar recording. And don't forget, join us on social media today to join the conversation by using the hashtag LAEDC Future Forum. Now, without further ado, I'd like to introduce the CEO of the Los Angeles County Economic Development Corporation, Bill Allen.
Thank you, Shane, and good morning, everyone. We're delighted to have you all join us for this, the latest in our series of Future Forums, where we reveal insights into the future outlook for key industries in LA County. A more important initiative than ever right now as we seek opportunities to re-employ the more than 1 million of our neighbors here who have lost their jobs due to the pandemic. This morning, we're proud to present an outstanding lineup of speakers to share their thoughts on the future of an industry that has long helped bind Angelenos together. Last year, we published with the LA Sports Council a report on the multi-billion-dollar economic contributions of our professional sports industry here in LA and the thousands of jobs that it provides to area residents. As the LAEDC exists to advance opportunity and prosperity for all area residents, we particularly value industries that provide just such opportunities. And we love our sports teams and venues because they have given us some of our most unifying and joyous moments in our lifetimes. Given the harsh realities of the COVID-19 pandemic and the nationwide calls for an end to racial injustice, we have all had to confront some painful truths in recent weeks, and we will continue to do so until real change is made. But we're also encouraged that soon, pending successful labor management negotiations ongoing across our professional sports leagues, we'll be able to welcome back our beloved sports teams, and we look forward to the eventual day when we can all be back in their home venues, cheering them on as a united community of Angelenos. Today, we're going to hear from the Chief Operating Officer of our Los Angeles Rams, from the Professional Sports Practice Leader for PricewaterhouseCoopers, and from a panel of sports industry experts will be moderated by a world-class athlete, 3-time Olympic medalist, dubbed the fastest woman alive, Carmelita Jeter. And none of this would be possible without our longtime partner in the Future Forum series, California State University, Dominguez Hills, whose leadership had the foresight 3 years ago to partner with us in bringing these conversations to the public. They're now serving as our Future Forum series presenting sponsor for the 3rd straight year. Cal State Dominguez Hills is a diverse, welcoming community of learners and educators, collaborating to change lives and communities for the better. With strong academic programs, dedicated faculty mentors, supportive staff, and many campus amenities, CSU Dominguez Hills is committed to connecting students to a high-quality, transformative education while providing our communities with the vital resource for diverse talent, knowledge, skills, and leadership needed to thrive today and tomorrow. It's my pleasure now to introduce the nationally respected psychologist, author, and educator who is the highly regarded 11th president of Cal State University Dominguez Hills, Dr. Thomas Parham.
Thank you very much, Bill. And we should tell our participants who've joined us today that with all that title, I'm simply your friend. And I thank you very much for that introduction. Again, I am Dr. Thomas Parham, president of California State University Dominguez Hills. And I'm honored to serve as the sponsor for the LAEDC Future Forum, which is held for the 2nd time in this virtual format. So we're glad all of you have joined us. And I want to thank the LAEDC for hosting these eye-opening forums and for bringing together such an impactful group of panelists today. Cal State University Dominguez Hills wants to be the place where these issues become the topics of critical discourse and analysis. And certainly we have provided one for you today. You know, the great boxer and perhaps the greatest athlete of all time, Muhammad Ali, was quoted as saying, "I hated every minute of training, but I said, don't quit. Suffer now and live the rest of your life as a champion." It is in that spirit of suffering through the training and practice to deliver the best performance on the field or the floor of competition that has characterized the legacy of sports in Los Angeles region for decades. And unquestionably, the Southland has borne witness to a host of championship performances over the last 5 to 6 decades. Indeed, the history of athletic excellence and accomplishment has taken fans to the height of exhilaration and to the lows of profound disappointment. But without question, the climate and ambiance of the LA lifestyle is inextricably linked to the sports teams and athletes that compete on one of the world's greatest stages, that is Los Angeles. Now, the focus of today's forum is the future of sports in Los Angeles, a topic of great interest to those in every strata of society. And whether cheering on the Rams or the Chargers, the Rams my favorite team, the Lakers, the Clippers, or the Sparks at the Staples Center, professional golfers like Tiger Woods at the famed Riviera Country Club, anxiously waiting Clayton Kershaw to deliver that 3-2 pitch at Dodger Stadium, or cheering on Division I, II, or III NCAA teams at local universities and colleges, or watching America's Olympic athletes compete in summer games to test their skill against the best in the world. Sports brings Southland residents together like few things can. And as a sports fan myself, I can attest to the feelings of camaraderie and community that arise when we're all in the crowd together, rooting in common for our favorite team to come out on top. And I'm also keenly aware of the platform sports and athletes have to bring attention to the social justice issues of our day. And the leaders who are joining us today are all involved in a variety of aspects of the sports industry, from managing professional football teams to helping bring Olympics back to Los Angeles. They are uniquely positioned to bring us together and speak on how sports and majoring sport events will impact Southern California for years. In the next decade, my friends, will see Southern California host everything from Super Bowls to the US Open Golf Tournament to FIFA World Cup and Summer Olympics, to say nothing of potential World Series or NBA final appearances for our local teams. Indeed, our region has and will be spotlighted on a global stage for time to come. And so I'm just excited to look at what's going on with gleaming new stadiums like SoFi, Bank of California stadiums as well, proposed new Charger Arena opening doors. Let's not forget about the impact these venues have on their surrounding communities. And issues like play equity drive the mission of LA 84 and their CEO, Renato Simrel, who I'm especially looking forward to hearing speak today. Filled with athletes from across the spectrum of American society, professional sports is uniquely positioned to address issues of social equity and togetherness. From Jackie Robinson to Colin Kaepernick, from Arthur Ashe to LeBron James, sports figures have been lightning rods for social change, and I look forward to seeing what our local teams will be able to present to us. Professional sports promises to bring capital, jobs, innovation, and other things to Los Angeles over the next few decades. And the California State University Dominguez Hills plans to work with you every step of the way, Bill, and others. We will continue to educate and train highly skilled workforce required to successfully stage world-class sporting events. So we're looking forward to that. I'm also looking forward to hearing our panelists speak on the impact of COVID-19 pandemic, which has effectively stopped live sports in its tracks for months, and how they are managing to sustain economic momentum and how our panelists will affect. In conclusion, I want to also mention how proud I am to see our Cal State University Dominguez Hills most decorated athlete as our moderator today. That is Olympic gold medalist Carmelita Jeter. She's a 2006 graduate of California State University Dominguez Hills, who continues to inspire through both her coaching and her work with the community. And I thank you for joining us today, Ms. Jeter, or actually, should I say, Dr. Jeter. We gave her an honorary degree just recently last year. So thank you once again to LAEDC for hosting this event. I'll now turn the virtual microphone back over to Bill Allen, their CEO, who will introduce our first featured presenter of the morning. Thank you and welcome again.
Thank you, Dr. Parham, for your friendship and for your thoughtful and encouraging words this morning, for your commitment to preparing your students for a successful career in life, as well as for your commitment to the LAEDC and our collective work together with you, creating a more equitable regional economy that will be prepared to hire and benefit from the talents of your students in the years ahead. It's now my pleasure to introduce a man born and raised in Los Angeles, who along with his boss, LA Rams team owner Stan Kroenke, gave us all a great gift by bringing our Rams back to LA in 2016, winning the NFC Championship in 2018, and this fall will unveil the finest football stadium ever built, SoFi Stadium. Kevin Demoff is the Chief Operating Officer of the Los Angeles Rams and the team's top front office executive and liaison to team owner and chairman Stan Kroenke on all organizational matters. He's played a significant role in delivering on Mr. Kroenke's vision to design and construct the 298-acre sports and entertainment district in Inglewood that will serve as the home of the Rams beginning this fall. And he has spearheaded the organization's efforts to become one of the strongest philanthropic partners in professional sports. Please welcome our good friend, LADC member, Kevin Demoff.
Thanks, Bill. It's fantastic to be here on a little bit different circumstances. Some of the other times we've gotten together, over the past few years, and it's amazing to think that we're now months away from opening a building that, when I first started speaking with you and groups of the LADC was, just breaking ground. So it's fantastic to be here. It was great to hear the words of President Parham. And, I want to say the only thing I heard was Rams fan, but there was so many other good things in his remarks. It was hard not to be moved by them. It is hard to believe we sit here June 16th. We have a game scheduled at SoFi Stadium in less than 2 months as the opening game, preseason game against the Saints now, which will be the openers. It's an amazing time to be thinking about opening a stadium. I just watching those videos and all the great moments we've had coming back to Los Angeles, the 2 division titles, trip to the Super Bowl, the amazing moments, some of the great poignant moments there for the Chiefs game after the fires and the borderline shooting, a reminder, of what is to come in this new building. And I think, Bill, you said it, we're fortunate to be building the world's greatest stadium, 3.2 million square feet, 70,000, people. And it is strange to think we're going to be unveiling at this time. And all the time we thought about bringing back the NFL to Los Angeles in this amazing stadium. We never thought it would be opening up potentially empty without fans in the middle of a pandemic, in the middle of a fight against social injustice. But I do think we talk a lot in our organization publicly about silver linings as things go. And I could not be more proud of what we're doing in Inglewood right now. And I think we'll set a template and give us a chance to redefine, the impact that a stadium can have on a community that they can deliver, in those unique moments. And, there are times when, you have that self-doubt, from March on when you say, I can't believe after all this effort, all the events canceled, potentially playing without fans, those are your low moments. But what you get excited about is we have a chance now to set the tone for how sports come back, for how teams can play a leadership role in their community in times of need, both in short-term times of need as it relates to the COVID-19 pandemic and long-time times of need in solving, racial and social injustice. And if those of us who believe that things happen for a reason, this stadium opening in Inglewood, helping transform that community back into the city of champions it once was and lead in economic recovery, to help spur, the forum started it with their development there, but we certainly played a large part when Stan decided he was going to build the world's greatest sports and entertainment complex, 300 acres in the heart of Inglewood, now with the Clippers likely joining us across the street, a true revitalization of one of the great neighborhoods, in Los Angeles. And when you think about that, I think about the jobs created, by this project. Over 12,000 people have stepped foot on our construction site. Over a third of those local workers in the communities surrounding SoFi Stadium, a third of those roughly have never worked in construction before, were trained as apprentices, on this job and really started their careers there. And, 3,000 to 4,000 people a day, hundreds of millions of dollars in investment to women and minority-owned businesses as a part of this project. All transforming into when we open and when we are full with fans, which will happen sometime soon. Thousands of game day workers and new jobs created and opportunities in the culinary and hospitality fields. A campus, 300 acres where NFL media is going to set up shop and take their jobs from Culver City now into Inglewood. 1,000 people in that building, which nears completion now. 600,000 square feet of retail. Lots of local businesses, from Three Weavers, the brewing company, to other businesses setting up for the first time in Inglewood. Small businesses, not just chains and large malls, but really people ingrained in this community. When I think about a hotel that will come onto site to be a world-class hotel in this neighborhood and expand upon what you see in the LAX corridor, 25 acres of parks and lakes throughout this project for residents to come walk through and be proud of. This is going to be a beacon of Inglewood and the surrounding environments to come. And what better time to be opening it up than right now, to engaging that community and providing opportunity and hope throughout Inglewood, throughout South LA, as we try to solve the problems of injustice, from education to housing to policing to everything that is plagued our minority communities. I'm especially proud to be unveiling this building in Inglewood right now in a time of need for all of us. And I think it's tremendously exciting. And I think you mentioned, I've always envisioned when the Rams run into that tunnel for the first time, Sunday Night Football, September 13th against the Dallas Cowboys. And I always envisioned it with 80,000 screaming fans, and whether they're on Zoom, whether they're in virtual reality, or whether they're in person, it will be a special moment. For the first time, Los Angeles has really ever built an NFL stadium, and Los Angeles does many things well. Building new stadiums and sports venues isn't one of them. When you think about, the football venues, the Rose Bowl and the Coliseum are both roughly 100 years old, amazing historical venues, but certainly don't provide that modern atmosphere or amenities. It's hard to believe that Staples Center just celebrated its 20th anniversary, that LA Live is essentially 20 years old, and the change that is brought to downtown. And I think that's what excites me about what we can do in Inglewood. And you see what happened at LA Live and realize our project is 10 times the size of LA Live, and the economic impact that generated for downtown and the rebirth, and what we can do for Inglewood and the surrounding environments is just an amazing opportunity for us. When you think about the events that are coming back to Los Angeles, we're fortunate to host the 2022 Super Bowl, which will be the largest tourism event in Los Angeles since the 1984 Olympics, the 2023 College Football Playoff, the World Cup, and certainly, being the opening and closing ceremonies for the 2028 Olympics. And every time I go into our building, I get amazed about thinking about the Rams and the football, and obviously the Chargers and the Super Bowls. But when you walk down that quarter-mile tunnel we have from ground level down to our bottom floor, and imagine that the world's greatest athletes will parade through that tunnel and around SoFi Stadium, it's unbelievable. I think what's great about the stadium, so many firsts and feats: the world's first 4K 70,000 square foot video board, the first indoor-outdoor stadium that's ever been constructed. All of these amazing fan experiences, which people will get to see, I think are the highlight and ingenuity of Los Angeles. This building's going to take its place within Los Angeles architecture. I was hiking last week, socially distanced, of course, in the Santa Monica Mountains, and you can see the shell of this stadium rising up, over Los Angeles. But what's great about this building is it doesn't dominate the landscape. It fits into the neighborhood. It's sleek. It's modern. I think it's all the things we want, Los Angeles to become. And, as we can play a part in the economic recovery and the sports recovery of Los Angeles, I think it's going to be fantastic. It will be different in July and August and September than we ever imagined. But this building is not about 2020. This building is about providing jobs and opportunity and tourism for decades to come, and to put Los Angeles on the map of how you integrate and build those relationships and partnerships with the city, with the local community, and with the teams to generate meaningful change, both economically and socially.
Kevin, thank you so much, first of all, for giving us that long-term optimistic perspective, reminding us that this is a temporary challenge we face and the future is going to be remarkable. Thanks also to you and Mr. Kroenke for the multi-billion-dollar investment in Los Angeles, and particularly where you placed it in our region, and for what you've done to create jobs in the construction and in the ongoing operations. I just have one quick question, because we have a lot of panelists, and I know you can't stay for the expert panel later in this morning's program, but you've done so much to help create jobs in the community. Obviously, so many of our small businesses have been badly hurt by the lockdown to defeat the spread of the virus. Is there anything more the Rams can do? It's particularly challenging with limited, ability to have spectators in the stadium. But whether it's in the early reopening phase or as you get more spectators in, what are the opportunities for the Rams to help more small local businesses come back to life and potentially even reinvent themselves, inspired by a partnership with the Rams to make them long-term more sustainable?
It's a great question, Bill. And I think it starts with the events that are coming in when you look at the Super Bowl, the college football playoff and Olympics, and partnering with the city on those small vendors for procurement, right? It's not just about the Rams and the Chargers and the game days that we have, but it's really, for tenting businesses and services and staffing and culinary and, those that are in the area of hospitality. How do you help give them a leg up and start and continue the work that's been done, through so much of the work we've done with women in small minority businesses. There's been a focus on this project of trying to do that. And there's some elements. We've had great partners with Turner and AECOM Hunt to do large jobs, but we've had very small jobs. I think you're going to read about our culinary program in the months to come, really engaging local restaurants, local restaurateurs, and helping bring that industry back in a meaningful way. And I know with all of whether it's the Business Assistance Virtual Network, trying to partner with government agencies, to find those right partners and bring them along. It's spending money in the communities. There's nothing I love more than going to Englewood and stopping at Hilltop Coffee along the way in the morning. Small, store in Englewood. They now have 2 stores in Englewood. Bringing that foot traffic back through Englewood in a meaningful way, not just growing it for larger corporations, but really getting those businesses on Market Street and everywhere else in Englewood involved. I think you're going to see this grow. When you see 70,000 people strong come to those events, they're going to park in strip malls and visit those restaurants and businesses and bring, that to life. And I think the same kind of investment we see along our metro stops when you look at the Expo line, through from Santa Monica all the way in, and you see that development along the Crenshaw line now. I think you'll see with the stadium as well, really bringing that forefront. I look at, our stadium, with our investment, which I think will be $20 to $30 billion over decades to come on those 300 acres. I look at what's being done at LAX, 40 to 50 billion, really reimagining that front door to Los Angeles along that LAX, to SoFi Stadium corridor. Obviously what Steve Ballmer and the Clippers are trying to do, really bringing Century Boulevard to life in a meaningful way, bringing Prairie to life. And I think, all of Englewood's going to have a transformation. And through that, you'll spread out, into the surrounding communities, which are so important as well as we focus on that job and economic creation.
Kevin, thank you for being such an engine of economic opportunity in our region and for being with us this morning. I know you have other commitments to get to, so I'm going to thank you on behalf of all my colleagues at the LADC and the audience for our webinar this morning.
I'll say, Bill,
celebrating with you in September.
Absolutely. Look forward to it. Take care.
Thanks, Kevin. So our next speaker is Mike Keenan, Managing Director and Sports Practice Leader for PricewaterhouseCoopers. Mike is a sports professional with 25 years experience in finance, accounting, and league and team operations. Mike previously worked for the NFL as a senior director. He spent 4 years with the Cleveland Browns, 2 years as their chief financial officer, and 2 years as president of the club. Mike leads PricewaterhouseCoopers' U.S. sports practice across multiple lines of service, providing services to both professional and collegiate teams and leagues, giving him a broad perspective on the professional and collegiate sports industry. Mike, it's great to have you with us today. I'm going to turn the virtual platform over to you.
Great. Thanks, Bill. I was hoping Kevin was still on so I could represent my Rams towel from the Super Bowl a couple of years back. So Kevin, I give you a virtual wave there. Hello, everybody. My name is Mike Keenan. I'm a managing director and PwC sports practice leader. As Bill mentioned, I started with the firm a long time ago. I was on the audit side of things, and I worked on the audits of the NFL and the NBA salary caps. From there, I went to the NFL. I was there for about 10 years at the Management Council. We did multiple collective bargaining agreement extensions, things around salary cap, player contracts, and the like. I expanded my role to get more into team revenues and team expenses. And then I left and I went to the Cleveland Browns, and I was there for 4 years, 2 as CFO and 2 as team president. I got back to the firm about 9 years ago, and I think I have a unique lens in that I worked for a team, I worked for a league, and I've been a service provider twice. I guess what I'll say is right now we are at, stating the obvious, we're at an unusual time in sports. Really, since March 11th, everything has kind of been shut down. Sports have come to a standstill. On the panel that's coming up after this, we will discuss kind of what that means and what are the impacts there. It was good to see over the weekend. We had a PGA event and we had a NASCAR event, both without fans, but it started to kind of get certain leagues coming back into it. And each of the leagues is in kind of one form or another of returning to work or returning to play. So I thought I would do in this presentation was just to give you an idea of the size of the sports world. And when I say that, it's the size of the sports world pre-COVID. And I realize that's, going to be a little bit hard to get your mind wrapped around. But this is from a report that we issue, once a year. We issued it last November. And obviously a lot has changed since then. Well, we were good, but we weren't good enough to predict a pandemic. But it's really too early for us to know how these numbers are going to be impacted on both a short-term and a long-term basis. So as we get into it, sports is a big business. I think everybody realizes that. It's been called, kind of the original reality TV. It's unscripted. There are great storylines, but it also creates a lot of jobs. And Kevin alluded to some of that. Not only jobs at teams and for players, but jobs in the community. And it also has a significant impact on state and local communities in that it creates tax revenue, everything from payroll taxes to sales taxes to admission taxes. So it creates jobs and it creates tax revenue for it. And then there's also the impact on the businesses that surround it, the ancillary businesses, things like, hotels, car rentals, bars, restaurants. And again, these are all pre-COVID, but it just kind of gives you an idea. Each year we issue a Super Bowl economic impact study. The latest one we issued in February for Super Bowl 44, we had projected that we believe that it would be a $218 million direct spending, indirect spending throughout the South Florida region. So you can see it's a pretty big deal to have that an event like that come through here. Kevin mentioned LA is going to have Super Bowl, a college football playoff, the Olympics, and the World Cup, and so there'll be a lot of there'll be a lot of infrastructure work in there, and there'll be a lot of stuff going on. So for the past 7 years, we've published, and you can see it on the screen, but it's our sports outlook, and it looks at projections for the next 5 years for the primary revenue drivers in sports. I believe you were either sent a link before my presentation or maybe even during it of that, as well as our Super Bowl economic impact study. So if we want to move to the next slide, our report really focused on the 4 main areas. So it's media, it's gate, it's sponsorship, and it's merchandise. Keep in mind, teams can generate and do generate additional revenue sources from things like concessions and parking. But we really focused in our report just on the 4 largest. And you can see the growth from 2019 to 2023 for each of the categories. As you flip to the next slide, I apologize in advance. As an accountant, we love numbers, and there's a lot of them. So this is actually within our report, so you can go back and look at it later as you see it. But we have projected revenues. If you look at the shaded 2019 columns, go from 73 billion with a B, 73 billion to 83 billion, at a compound annual growth rate of about 3.2%. And so, not a bad growth rate on a number that big. You can see from the chart that media is growing the fastest at about 4.6%, while merchandise is the slowest grower at 1.2%. Yet all are still growing. We'll dive into each of these categories, starting with media on the next slide. Just for some context, in 2014, media had, Gate had a 20% lead on media. It was 20% greater than media was as recently as 2014. And as the large network TV contracts were extended, what ended up happening in 2017 was that media surpassed Gate, and it was a fairly significant event. So when you look at media, we projected it to grow to 25.2 billion in 2023, and that's a growth rate, as I said, of 4.6%. Sports generates high ratings. That's obvious. The Super Bowl had over 100 million viewers. It was interesting, just over this past weekend, Major League Baseball, during the middle of a pandemic, was able to negotiate an extension of their deal with Turner, and the rights fees increased by 40% over the average of the last deal. So you can see there's, sports is still popular with that. And they lock these agreements in for the long term. The NFL will be up next, and probably in the next 12 to 18 months. And it's interesting in that you have a lot of non-traditional broadcast companies, things like Amazon, Facebook, Google, and DAZN, among others. And there'll be an increase in competition for these rights. And so with that, you'll end up seeing probably a similar or greater increase. Another piece that you will think about in terms of media rights is sports gambling. And within our outlook, we get into a little more detail about it. But the idea that perhaps a tech company could partner with a gaming company and allow people to make micro wagers on a variety of individual plays during the game is something that could increase the value of media rights and also increase revenues to the teams. We've seen just even over the weekend, the PGA event it drew 3.1 million viewers, which was 50% higher than what they did last year for the same tournament. So you can see there is an appetite for live sports. And when they come back, it's going to be bigger and better than ever. If fans initially won't be allowed to go, this will even, make sports must-see TV, I guess is what I would say. So, we'll flip now, we'll go to Gate. We projected it to be $21.8 billion in 2023, and that's a growth rate of 2.5%. What I'll say about Gate is even pre-COVID-19, the growth in Gate has slowed over the last several years. And why is that? Or actually the growth that we have there is really just due to expansion as well as pricing increases on tickets. Teams have always had concerns about getting fans into the game. And when you think about it, there's a cost to it, not only in money, but a cost in time. And you make a real investment to go to a game. And so, teams have tried to attract getting fans in there, and they've done everything. Baseball has seems like a giveaway day every other game. And so, I think now, obviously, with COVID-19, there'll be no fans in the stands as sports restarts. They've been discussing, again, depending on state and local limits, maybe going to capacity of 25%, perhaps as high as 50% prior to a vaccine being developed. I guess the question that we'll discuss it later is that, will fans return to the stands? Will they feel safe? And when you think about the impact on the operating model to teams, what happens is you not only have the gate that you lose, but you have the kind of what I'll call gate-related items, so things like concessions and parking and merchandise and perhaps some sponsorship within the venue. Some of the leagues have as much as 40% of their revenue that are tied to gate and gate-related items. So in the short term, they're going to have to figure out ways to kind of make this work. As we move on to sponsorship, you can see we projected it to be $20.6 billion in 2023, a growth rate of 3.8%. It's closing in on Gate, just like, as I said, Gate has been slower and these other areas have been growing. There are new opportunities within sponsorship for things like sports gambling, obviously uniform rights, and then there's, the digital ad placement as well. And with COVID-19, one of those ways that the teams may look to, generate revenue to offset the loss in Gate. Imagine if the NFL were to sell uniform rights, being able to put a patch on your uniform, how much that would generate, or if teams were able to put advertising on the field. Again, you don't want to overwhelm people, but in the short term, these could be things to make up some of the shortfall. Obviously, you need to not run afoul of your network broadcast partners because you don't want to kill the golden goose. The final category we'll look at is merchandise. This is really the sale of licensed products, with team logos. What I'll say about this, fairly mature revenue stream with marginal growth. We project it to go to $15.4 billion in 2023, and the growth rate is 1.2%. The market itself fairly saturated, limited growth. So I realize I've covered a lot of information in a short period of time. I encourage you to read our Sports Outlook and look at our Super Bowl economic impact study that just for more information. I guess I'll sum it up by saying this. The view that we just looked at was pre-COVID, and obviously sports is going to be impacted. The question is how much in what I'll call the short term, the next 12 to 18 months, and then how much in the longer term, kind of post-vaccine. I don't have a crystal ball to see the future, but we'll discuss some of these changes. I would say on a long-term basis, I'm bullish on sports. And again, to echo what Kevin says, this is the long game here. And we have a little bit of a setback. We lost a few yards in the play, but now we're going to keep going and moving forward. So with that, Bill, I'll throw it back to you.
Thanks, Mike. That was fascinating. A lot of questions occur, but we have a great moderator and panel on which you'll have the chance to respond to some of those. Before we transition to our expert panel, I'd like to remind everybody you can join the conversation on social media by using the hashtag LAEDC Future Forum. Please do join in the conversation. It's a particular honor for me this morning to introduce our moderator for our panel of experts on the sports industry, as she is not only a sports industry leader herself and a Southern California native, but as you heard earlier, an alumna of our Forum Series partner, Cal State Dominguez Hills. Dubbed the fastest woman alive, Carmelita Jeter is also a 3-time Olympic medalist in track and field, winning gold, silver, and bronze at the 2012 Olympic Games in London, where she anchored the U.S. 4x100 meter relay team that took home gold by smashing the previous world record by more than half a second. She also became one of the few U.S. athletes to ever medal in the 100 and 200 meters at the same Olympic Games. She retired from professional competition in 2017, is currently the associate head track and field coach at Missouri State University. Please show off your digital applause skills and help me welcome the great Carmelita Jeter. Carmelita, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you. Such oh, that was amazing. I didn't even know who I was for a second.
We're thrilled to have you with us.
Thanks for having me here. You've pretty much summed up everything about me. I'm definitely grateful to be here. Definitely happy to be a part of anything that Cal State Dominguez Hills has to do with, being that I am an Angelino. I'm born and raised in Los Angeles, and I graduated from Cal State Dominguez Hills. Today we have an amazing panel for you guys, absolutely amazing. And I'm actually gonna let each person introduce themselves. Like, I can talk about each person, but I want each person to say a little something about themselves so you can really know exactly who you're speaking to today. And first, we're going to start off with Renata.
Thank you, Carmelita. It's good to see you again, other than my video work, and it's a pleasure to be here. I'm president and CEO of the LA84 Foundation, and as many of you on the call know, that's the legacy of the 84 Olympic Games that were held in Los Angeles. I am a third-generation Angelino. I actually grew up in the city of Carson and learned to play tennis at Cal State Dominguez Hills, and actually rode my bike during the 84 Olympic Games to try to sneak into the cycling races at the Velodrome. So I know the city of Carson very well, and so thank you, President Parham, for this partnership. I think, given these times, the other important point to note that I'm also president of the Play Equity Fund, and that was an organization established by the LA84 Foundation about a few years ago to really respond to the inequities in youth sport. It is the only nonprofit focused solely on play equity as a social justice issue, and it seeks to level the playing field for young people through sport. And we achieve this by raising awareness of the inequities that exist across the board, community, school-based, and the pay-to-play system. And then we also support the ecosystem of the youth sports-based development organization, the ecosystem, to help them have greater impact, in addition to developing partnerships to advocate for more funding and sustain system changes that are going to be essential for us to really see progress and change. And so we were planning to launch the Play Equity Fund pre-COVID-19, and certainly the results of the two crises that we've had with COVID-19, as well as the global calls for racial inequality, and really standing up the Play Equity Fund and the work that needs to be done for us to all come together as a community and use sport to really drive social change. So it's a little bit about me. It's a pleasure to be here, and I look forward to the conversation.
Thank you. Thank you so much. David Siegel, you're up.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I'm excited to be here as well. Those of you that don't know, I was 22 years with the Dodgers organization, and I, as well as a lot of people on this call, I'm a born and raised Angelino, and you don't get too many opportunities to create a version 2.0 narrative for a legacy organization like the LA Sports Council. So when this opportunity came across my plate, I absolutely jumped on it. LA is one of the country's epicenters for sports business, and what we're really looking to do is bring together the teams, the leagues, the venues, and really the collective sports business industry in this region to create a stronger community. So looking forward to doing that, and thank you for allowing me to be here.
Thank you for being here, David. Mr. Russ Simons. I do believe I said that right.
You did. Thank you for that. Good morning to everybody. I am the Senior Vice President of Facility and Campus Operations for SoFi Stadium in Hollywood Park. I've been in the business of managing sports and entertainment facilities for nearly 40 years. This is around the 40th new building that I've been a part of bringing on worldwide. I've worked with every major professional sports team and or facility in North America and many more around the world. That means I've made every mistake that a man can make, and I can have a conversation about how to help all of us not make the same mistake twice.
Very good. Thanks for joining us. Now, Mike, we know you just spoke, but would you like to say a little something else about yourself?
No, I mean, I'm honored to be on the panel with all these great people, and hopefully I can say something intelligent.
Okay, great. So I'm going to ask a few questions. I'm also going to every now and then stop into our Q&As and get some questions from other people. So just so you know, I will, feed some of those questions in there. I definitely want us to have a little fun today, relax a little bit, enjoy ourselves. Half of us are Angelenos, so we definitely need to bring that spirit to the conversation. The first question I'm going to ask, and it's for anyone that would like to answer the question, the acquisitions of 2 professional football teams provided a large economic boost for the region. And with the LA County serving as host to multiple international and national sporting events through the next decade, including 2021 MLS All-Star Game, 2022 Super Bowl, 2023 college football playoffs, and of course, the 2028 Olympic and Paralympic Games. What areas of the economy do you think will be impacted?
I'll go ahead and start. I mean, I think one thing to make a point against the backdrop of all those mega events is than any other city in the world. So that is a huge anchor for those events. And I do want to say that the Sports Council, working with the LA EDC, commissioned a economic impact report, really kind of a baseline of what the sports business industry means to this region. And it was probably the most comprehensive impact study undertaken in recent times. And we look for this to be kind of a longitudinal study that'll go deeper year over year. But just some real top line numbers, basically 6.2 billion in just economic input. It supported nearly 40,000 jobs. When you think of also really added 327 million in tax revenues for state and local government. Another thing to kind of footnote, more than just economics, these events and the diversity of the different events and teams really help develop a new generation of fans that are going to support sports in Los Angeles. And really, as diverse as our Los Angeles community is, that really goes a long way for impacting fans and jobs moving forward.
I see this as two different ends of the scale. On one hand, it's going to impact individuals, the opportunity for employment, for the opportunity for secondary employment, to be able to gain more access to revenue or wealth for them is going to be significant. At a large scale NFL game at SoFi Stadium, that will take 6,000 casual employees. It's significantly larger than what you would find in your average NFL stadium. And as Kevin pointed out, this is the largest NFL stadium ever built. It is also the most complex, and complexity equals more and more people necessary to actually accomplish those jobs. On the other side of this has to do with some of the things that you would think of from obvious businesses, businesses that are already existing in our area that creates a secondary economy. one of the things that comes to mind quickly for me is if you think about that we're in proximity to the Los Angeles World Airport, and there are parking companies and there are hotels that actually sell parking to support the airport. Well, they have shuttles and they have bricks and mortar parking areas, that type of thing, and we will create another economy for that group. And the nice part about that for me is I don't consider those as an asset in the overall transportation management and operations plan. Our plan is based on other direct assets that we will employ and deploy for those reasons. But that will create a lot of opportunity for exist businesses to have a secondary economy that they weren't planning for prior to this type of environment.
And Carmelita, I think a third area is the community impact. Kevin touched on a small portion of what the Rams and the Kroenke and Stan Kroenke are doing to stand up community organizations, not just in Inglewood, but in Watts. The work that they're doing with the Inglewood Unified School District of really trying to focus on those long-term, impact and investment in these community organizations to really have the change. And I think that leads into what Russ is talking about, the employment opportunities for minority women and business owners and individuals. So I think it's a three-part, David point in terms of the economic impact to the region. I think it's in terms of the ancillary job growth and business growth with minority and women-owned enterprises, and then the impact that not only the traditional games have, but when you think about the sporting events that are coming, like the Super Bowl, like the U.S. Open, those are going to have, I think, a deeper impact from a community perspective, because there seems to be an intentionality of the sports teams to really want to drive beyond just economics, but to really uplift the community with these efforts as well.
What Renata's point really illustrates is, I talked about jobs, working, but jobs lead to careers. And one of the things that Kevin alluded to is we're in the process of creating a culinary institute, a bricks and mortar investment into people to be able to start by learning those trades, applying those trades, hopefully at our facility and many of the other sports and entertainment facilities in the Los Angeles area. But when we can actually achieve an opportunity where jobs lead to careers, we've made a fundamental or foundational impact on the community around us.
Thank you. Now I'm going to jump into the Q&A just because I want us to make sure that we're answering a couple of questions from the people that would really like to know some important things. So from Bernard asks, and I believe he directed this to you, Renata, the play equity work Renata is leading, coupled with the recent NCAA amateur sports paradigm, are big shifts and concerns. Can you please speculate on the economic impacts of these landscapes, shifting pieces, and their importance in this social justice centered time we are living?
Wow, do we have the rest of the day to actually unpack that question? I think in the short term, I think both the COVID-19 crisis as well as the ensuing economic crisis, and then if you add the racial tensions and the protests we've been having globally, the gap between the haves and the have-not is only going to widen. If you look at data that the sports that's been put out between 2008 and 2014, youth sports participation dropped from 45% to 38%. And most of that was in urban communities, Black and brown communities, and poor communities because of the economic challenges of being able to afford the pay-to-play system. So the work of the Play Equity Fund, those sport-based youth development organizations really trying to engage and increase participation is going to be ever more so critical now than it has been before, because the frontline workers are the ones that are really being impacted the most in terms of the economic disparities in play, equipment, joining programs, is the least of their worries when there's food insecurities, there's housing insecurities. And so, we're excited about being able to stand up the efforts of Play Equity. And I know there's a question later on about what sports teams are looking to do to really drive change. So I'll pause, with that as a short answer to the question, and come back to it hopefully when a question comes up about what sports teams are doing to really drive social change through sport.
Great. Thank you so much for answering that for us, Renata. Next question. Looking at these larger sporting events like the Super Bowl in 2022 and the Olympics in 2028, will they have a more sustaining impact on job growth across the region and in particular to LA County? How does a city continue to remain a prime contender for more?
I'll take that one to start. I'll leave the LA County to the Los Angelinos there, and I'll just talk more about how does a city remain a prime contender. I think if you look back, I was going back through some of our Super Bowl reports, and South Florida has hosted 11 Super Bowls, New Orleans 10, Los Angeles 7. So the first step is to get into the rotation there. Now, it hasn't been one in Los Angeles in a while, but there's a number of criteria. One, you need a certain number that the NFL requires of hotel rooms, and ranging in different kind of class and price. And Los Angeles clearly has that. Then you need a first-class venue, and SoFi is going to be incredible. I'm looking forward to one day visiting it. I went back in Miami, didn't have a Super Bowl. They have Super Bowls in February, but they didn't have one until back in 2010. And what they did was they ended up investing in their stadium. So they put $350 million in investment into the stadium to put up a canopy that will protect people from the sun as well as from rain. And so, again, put money in there, and then they improved the stadium itself, club lounges and the like. And so they ended up getting, not only a Super Bowl, but they got the college football playoff, and they have other events. So I think the first part of it is just, get in line, and clearly they have one. And once you have one, you can have more.
And I'll take that on. I also sit on the board of the Los Angeles Sports Entertainment Commission. And I think you should be mindful that bidding on these sporting events and winning them is only part of the challenge. And I think you're right, Mark, getting into the rotation is important. But the Super Bowl alone is going to cost the host city, LA, $50 million to put that event on, $50 to $60 million. And so the board of the Los Angeles Sports and Entertainment Commission is working to create a fund so that not for every event that comes through that you have to raise dollars, that you already have a fund that's established so that you can create that competitive nature when you're bidding against some of these other cities like Florida, like Texas, like Nevada. And then also they've been engaged in conversations with LA County and the state in terms of companion legislation, because it's a resource issue as well to be competitive. And you have a lot of cities that, other cities that have been more competitive to us heretofore, the SoFi Stadium coming to fruition and bidding on those on those major sporting events because they have the resources to be able to host these. And so I think the work of the state and the Los Angeles Sports and Entertainment Commission, along with the county, of really creating a public-private partnership to make sure that LA is best positioned competitively and to have the funds and resources to be successful when these events come. And then they're also looking at making sure that there's that social impact in the community that these events have as well. And so I think as we start to see us coming out of COVID-19, LA is looking to position itself in a competitive in a competitive enough framework to be able to be successful and not just getting into the rotation, but winning these Super Bowls, these NBA All-Star games, etc.
I think you need to break down the difference between the marquee event and the true question here, which is sustainable impact on job growth. The marquee events, as everyone has said, are really important for drawing attention to our community and setting a set of expectations for future events that want to be here. But overall, sustainable job growth has to do with not just the average NFL stadium does about 24 event days a year, for example. And in Hollywood Park and SoFi Stadium, 298 acres, it is a sort of a multiplex of opportunity. So prior to COVID-19, we would have done 22 events in our first 90 days. Part of the lure of coming to Los Angeles as a entertainment capital of the world and a gateway to Asia, a gateway to South America, has to do with the attractiveness of people who are already coming here and want to come here for not only sports and entertainment, but other reasons. So as you look at the makeup of Hollywood Park, it's not just the stadium and the multitude of events we have there. We have a 6,000 seat performance venue that's probably going to house somewhere around 130 plus event days a year. In addition to that, the first phase of retail has 515,000 square feet of retail, bars and restaurants, grocery stores, clubs, all of this other stuff. So the sustainable job impact has to do with really building on all of those things, working in collaboration in concert with each other to create sustainable jobs. And you already know that I'm on Jobs Lead to Careers. So I think the marquee events are important and necessary, and literally the amount of potential revenue from a marquee event, despite the cost that Renata has very accurately described, the cost of hosting the events, it's not nothing ever. But if those things working together are what create a sustainable job environment for us.
Thank you, Russ. Well, we are definitely moving on to the next question. We have a lot of questions from, everyone that's watching, but I'm trying to stick to our script just a tad. I will get to you guys' questions. You have so many of them. The next question I'm going to ask would be, according to the 2019 PricewaterhouseCoopers Annual Sports Outlook, gate revenue is growing at a slower rate than other revenues like media, given COVID. Do you think that trend will continue or turn into negative growth? How does that figure into strategy of professional teams generating revenue?
I want to know what Mike thinks.
Yeah,
So Mike, we put it on you, Mike. It's your turn.
That's fine. I'll accept. I think, when you look at it, as I mentioned before, gate has been a struggle, and teams have done a good job to make fans want to come in. You've seen teams like the Falcons and other teams have the fan-friendly pricing with concessions and kind of changing the business model. And so I think, until there is a vaccine, there will be pressure on gate, and there'll be no gate or limited gate. There'll obviously be protocols that are put in place. I think the Dolphins were one of the first teams to come out back in late March and said, this is kind of our plan. We think when we're allowed to have fans back in, probably 25% of capacity, taking temperatures as you go in there, encouraging wearing a mask, and there'll be a lot of protocols. But I think in the end, it's going to be just the consumer feels safe prior to a vaccine. I think post-vaccine, sports will be back bigger and better than ever. But will teams ask fans to sign a waiver or some kind of liability release if you in fact contract COVID-19? We talked before just about the cost of cleansing these venues of could be $1 million that for a large venue per event. If you had 80,000 seats, it may cost that to do that. So I think there's going to be some short-term pain, I think, but it'll ultimately lead to more of a long-term gain. So I think it's the short term is not going to be pretty, but I think long term it will be okay.
Yeah, and I also want to note that it's going to be really interesting to see how teams are going to look into better ways to kind of integrate their sponsors, especially from a digital perspective with their fan base. I mean, that was kind of the trajectory before, but it's obviously accelerated. And I love the fact that really teams are going to have to work hard to show their fans that they're fully engaged in kind of that two-way conversation, and so to your point, Mike, I think short-term pain, but I think that's going to really pay dividends in terms of strengthening the fan base and engaging newer fans in the long term.
So there's a counterintuitive part of this. Prior to COVID-19, we were all moving towards what we'll call a frictionless environment. We wanted to make it as easy and convenient as possible, driveway to driveway, from when you left to how you got to us, approach, arrival, entry, all of your experiences in the building. Now, not unlike the post 9/11, where a bunch of procedures and protocols had to get layered on top of that in order to make sure that our fans could have quiet enjoyment while they were in our we're going to go, at least in the short term, prior to vaccine, to actually layering some additional friction onto that experience. And so I would say that I'm completely in agreement with my associates here that short term, you're going to have to really love the live gate. You're going to have to really be looking for that and have to make the psychological leap to return to a mass gathering environment. And we're going to need to do a lot to assure people that we've done everything, whether it's clean, health checks, all of those things, to make it as palatable as possible. But the short term will be a challenge, but long term, I agree with Mike. I think people, there are very few places for us to gather again as a society. I guess it's sports and Starbucks, right? So I think we'll, in church, yes, ma'am. I think we will be back, but I think there will be challenges in the short term.
Well, that was definitely going to start into my next question. Everybody wants to know when we're going to get back to watching our favorite teams play and screaming and cheering. And, what does the roadmap to normal look like during this post-COVID? How are the leagues and teams shifting their tactics to keep fans engaged without live events? What restrictions will be in place if NFL ticket holders are allowed to attend season games at SoFi Stadium? And how are esports and streaming being embraced? I'm sure this is a question that so many people would really love the answers to, as I'm also waiting for, the answers of how is sports going to be.
There's no there's no one part of this answer. I mean, this is going to be a collaboration through a wide variety of people who aren't always actually working together. I mean, your state health department, your local public health have a large seat at the table. You have a situation where all these things working together is going to be the challenge. We just passed in California in stage 3, which allows us to conduct sports and entertainment events without live audiences, and allows the teams to train versus individual training to now more traditional team training in the collective. We are optimistic that by the time the NFL season starts, with an agreement on the procedures and protocols, that we may be able to have partial fans in the stadiums themselves. And then the walk towards full stadium integration is really going to be different depending on what state you are. The governor of Texas came out last week and said that in sporting events, you can have up to 50% of your capacity. It's a challenge to consider that and think about how you do that in an environment that maintains social distancing, because there are physical limits to the spaces. So some of that's going to change based on where we are and the conditions that we're in. I choose to be optimistic about this because there are a lot of people who are spending a lot of time working on this, not just emotionally, but really the science that can help keep people safe, and the policies and procedures, protocols that we affect to welcome people, invite them back, and welcome them into our care. But it takes a lot of, not the standard groups of people. There are a lot of more people who are weighing in, and we're going to have to be very, very thoughtful and purposeful in terms of how we prepare to go forward.
Yeah, I think in the in the short term, some areas I think we may pivot towards are using technology. And so when you think about it, for years we've talked about AR, augmented reality, and virtual reality. And if you've ever experienced it, it's great. But for the fact the headset costs thousands of dollars, and you have to wear a helmet around. And so I think with all these great minds in technology, is there a way they can develop something quicker to allow fans to experience maybe sitting on the floor of an NBA game with their feet on the floor and feeling like they're there, but not having to spend a lot of money? Could games be broadcast in that? There's a lot of different ways to look at it. I think the other thing, and Kevin had touched on it, was just access to players. In that, in the past, and I did it in my previous life, getting a player to show up, they practice, they play, they're lifting weights. The last thing they want to do is to make an appearance for somewhere. But here, if you can do it virtually, and you can, instead of Kevin's example, having 1,000 people show up for a meet and greet, you could have 10,000 or 20,000. I think using again technology to do that. If you watched the golf a few weeks ago with Tom Brady and Peyton Manning and the like, it was just interesting. They were all mic'd up, and they all were talking amongst themselves. Like 4 people just went out to play golf, kind of razzing each other, and it was just interesting. And I think if you have more of that, kind of allowing people, with it not being in the stands, but to be able to know the athletes and to be able to kind of appreciate their sense of humor, or just what they're thinking at that time. I think those are some avenues that you could potentially monetize through sponsorship. But I think either way, it'll engage fans who won't be able to be in the stands in the short term.
And Mike, to your point, in terms of your fan engagement and just talking about the golf event that was done with Peyton Manning and the like, now PGA is looking to mic up other players on the tour, as a way to engage fans and make the game more interesting. So I think there are some interesting new opportunities that are coming out of COVID-19 and the social isolation we've seen in the use of technology to be a more robust way in which to engage the fans in a different and a more unique way.
Your esports question is an interesting one. I actually don't think that COVID is a driving force for esports growth. I think esports is the driving force for esports growth, and I think that's going to continue to grow in those audiences.
Yeah, and Russ, I think for what we're seeing with some of the esport, Riot Games being one of them, is with the social isolation that we've had over the last 3 to 4 months. Is they're actually looking at ways to engage more physical activities, sort of a play day, if you will, because of the balance that you need and, staring at the screen, the stress and mental anxiety that, a lot of communities are facing. So I think they're also starting to look at, and we're having conversations with them about how do we not have an either or, but an and really bring back play and outdoor recreation as a balance to esport and gaming.
as they're maturing also, you can see that they are now sort of becoming more sensitive or opportunist with regard to revenue, embedded sponsors and advertisers into that environment. It's like any other emerging product. At the very beginning, it was the purity of playing the game, that type of thing. And now they're just sort of paying attention, particularly, I would think, because of the added numbers and because of those numbers equivalent to football saying, hey, we've got this many eyeballs. Now these things are worth more. And it's an audience that's hard to reach by traditional advertising methods. So I think that those will continue to grow on the esports side.
Thank you. Thank you. You guys are doing so well. We have so many questions in this Q&A box, and our time is slowly chipping away. And I'm just trying to make sure I get the right questions asked so people aren't saying, well, why you didn't ask this? So I'm definitely going to jump to more of a role of professional sports and social change, being that I am an athlete, was an athlete, Olympian, fastest woman alive. It's some pretty great questions on here regarding, how is it going to change the LA County? So here's one of my questions. I'm going to actually direct this to Ms. Renata. What are some ways professional sports have brought about significant positive change in the LA County? Where might there be room for a greater improvement and more work to be done?
Yeah, I think as it relates to the work that the sports teams have done, all of the sports teams in Southern California have a community relations and a foundation, that's working with community organizations, nonprofit organizations, looking to do youth leadership, looking to engage them in sport activity and play activity. And that's in addition to what the various leagues have, like Play 60 for the NFL. So, certainly having an impact by supporting the youth sports ecosystem, if you will, through their traditional philanthropy and their traditional community relations work. As a result of, this global protest, for the George Floyds and the many other, African Americans who've lost their lives to police brutality, and just, people have been asking what's going to be different from 1992 to 2020, and how are we going to use this moment to count? And I've been encouraged that the conversations that the sports teams have been having, all of them in LA and even the sports teams as a group in Orange County, really want to make this different. They want to dig in deep. They want to understand how do they drive system changes, and they want to respond in a meaningful way. Tim Harris, with the Lakers, was quoted in the paper on Sunday. I don't know if you saw it. He says in the traditional response to sports teams, we're owning the press conference. You create a logo, you have a press conference, you say this is what you're going to do. And then, when the smoldering buildings get repaired and the protests go east of the 10 freeway, then people kind of forget. And we've been, with the Play Equity Fund, working with all of the sports teams on a strategy, Sport for Social Justice, that will be a longer term commitment of really supporting system changes at the after school programs, the school programs, because when you think about the point that Russ mentioned, jobs equals careers, but you really have to understand the data and be informed about what is it that sports teams can do and how can they leverage their platform for change. And when you compare African American males graduate at 59%, these are national data, 59% of African American males graduate from high school. Compared to 80% of white males. And when you think about the statistics of African Americans owning the juvenile incarceration rate, the criminal justice rate, the highest infant mortality rate in the world is African American women in the world. We own them in the US. So when you think about the statistics and the multitude of systems that have really oppressed and have been a function of this inequity, economic equity, educational equity, the conversation's different. I've created a 2-page, statistics of data for African American and minority communities, and the sports teams are really digesting that. They're asking the questions of organizations of how we can have change. They're engaging conversations with their players and their employees. Is how do we collectively, as a unit, make change, and how can we work with an appropriate partner like the Play Equity Fund to really have a long-term strategy and engaging in communities to drive change, particularly for our young people. So I remain hopeful. The conversation has been robust. We're looking to not to put anything out as a breaking news, but looking to make an announcement with the sports teams in relatively short order that it's going to really, I think, be an impactful and a really deep response to this particular moment to make sure that the sports are using their platform like their players, like their executives, like their in-game assets, engaging with their sponsors over the long term to make sure we're creating conditions for young kids to succeed. And it's something that I haven't seen since 1992 when I was here working, post riots in 1992. This is a different conversation, and teams are deeply engaged in driving some change through social justice.
Definitely glad to hear. I have truly learned so much from being the moderator on this call today. I just want you guys to know that. And I know if I've learned some things, people at home have definitely learned some things that they probably had, no idea about. I definitely want to say that. Dave, I'm gonna give you the last question, Dave. I hope you don't mind. But the question would be, do any of you have thoughts, Dave, do you have any thoughts on preparing students to have executive jobs in the world of sports? And how important is representation in these roles, and what are companies doing, or could companies be doing to ensure this?
Yeah, no, I think, first, I think it's just education. I think so many times you think about playing on the field or on the court or on the ice. And in my mind, it starts with the education about the sports of athletes will actually get to participate professionally on the field of play, but really open up, I think, the youth's eyes to potential jobs and opportunities. And I think it starts with mentorship, something I'm really passionate about. And I think to Renata's point, I think it's one place that all the teams and executives can really get behind and can impact the youth straight away in kind of an overall education process. So.
Thank you, Dave. Thank you so much. Now, we're running out of time, you guys. It went by pretty fast, right? I felt like at some point you really didn't need me sitting here because you guys were just going and you were on, but it was great, I guess, to have me here. But you guys did such an amazing job. I'm going to jump to one Q&A question and see which one I can pick out of here that, everyone might possibly answer. We have a lot of questions in here, and I just hope I picked the right one. Please don't get upset with me, everyone. I can only pick one. So I'm going to do the any, mini, miny, mo, and just pick. But the cost figures of new stadiums, this is from Sean Samami. Sean, I'm so sorry if I did not say that right, but people get my name wrong all the time. So the cost figures of new stadiums are hosting marquee events were well mentioned. Are the annual ROI figures for any of those new venues or cities also available to see the longer term economic impact of the spent dollars? It can go to anyone.
Russ?
So yeah, it goes without saying that it's a complex question, and it also depends on what we're looking at. So lots of times, and let's stay on the marquee events. When we talk about hosting something like a Super Bowl, there are lots of economic figures that get tossed around. And so what does it mean and how is it calculated? When we talk about the impact on a community, are we talking about the direct dollars that are spent in that community, or are we using a factor that shows how those dollars will move through the community and impact beyond just the first spend? So, in my experience throughout the country, different communities calculate all of this differently. So it's kind of hard to say. I think that there's probably empirical evidence that says, hey, because we made the investment in this, and these are the kinds of things that happen there. To Mike's earlier point, if you had a situation like South Florida that has hosted, I think, the most of the total Super Bowls, but yet didn't have one from 2010 until this past year because they had to make an investment in that facility, then I think you could say, okay, that investment in the facility led directly to that. And now what else has that led to? In the case of South Florida, they actually moved a major tennis tournament there. And so there's additional investment that's gone on the sort of the campus, slightly smaller than Hollywood Park. It's about 235 acres there in Florida versus 298 here. here. But each one of those things is going to be sort of incrementally adding to the value of that investment. And so I think that there is direct ways to do that if everybody can agree on one methodology. And there are certainly empirical or indirect ways to say, yes, my business is better. People, the job count is better. We're getting more of those kinds of events, and therefore the value of that investment has proven itself.
But Russ, I think you can also look at Staples Center and the intentionality and the strategy the Staples Center had, a much smaller version than SoFi Stadium and the surrounding development. Is that Staples Center started with an arena, with a venue to host the Lakers, and it grew into a community that has had tremendous economic impact. It basically put residential development on the map for downtown Los Angeles. And what, SoFi Stadium is 4 times the size of Staples Center, the arena?
10.
Sorry, 10 times. So when you think about it, and you're already seeing the benefits without the full development in Inglewood, as it relates to a number of companies that have moved into Inglewood, that's created jobs, it's created tax revenue for the city. So I think the major events that are coming in are only part of the thing to look at. But when you actually look at the intentionality of the strategy, that these venues like the SoFi Stadium, like Staples Center, is going to have a tremendous long-term economic benefit to the entire region of Southern California because of the not just the stadium, but the other development components that are part of that project as well.
Your example of Staples Center is a perfect example of my sort of empirical information. I'm sure many of you remember that prior to Staples Center, when it started to get dusk in that part of downtown, you knew that you sort of had to get out. It wasn't a place that was really conducive to being there afterwards. And you look at the energy of LA Live, and you look at the variety of infrastructure. I mean, all of the different office towers, all of the different hotels, all of the different restaurants, while not displacing, traditional places that have been there for years, like the Pantry and other places like that. So it's really a good example about how the existing can grow and sort of benefit with the advent of the new. And there is tremendous security in numbers. And so it's different between if you were just walking out of the Staples Center after a game when the Staples Center was the only thing in that part of town, even though you're still walking out with 18,000 of your closest friends celebrating a victory. Now that extends itself out in concentric circles. It now encompasses, a majority of downtown overall. And so I think that's part of where it might be difficult or challenging to find the financial methodology to sort all of that out in terms of the ROI intent of the question. But empirically and obviously and visibly, you can see that there's a material difference in that part of downtown, and we see continued investment because of that. And so, I mean, that's 20 years now. I mean, that is a perfect illustrative example of, I think, what we hope for certainly at Hollywood Park, but also what you hope for in an investment of any kind of sports, entertainment, or other kind of community-based project.
Thank you. Well, we are going to wrap up, but Renata, I have to ask one question before we wrap up. I'm so sorry. Last question. I hope you don't mind. I hope you don't mind. But
I got you, Carmelita. I got you.
I've watched you. I've been in the room with you. I've watched how you have controlled the room, how everyone's looking at you as you speak. They're so intrigued. They're paying attention. And so this next question I'm asking, it's from Laura Cineros, but I want to know the answer to this question too. You are the only female on this panel right now. And you have some women on here that would like to know, what advice do you have for women that work in the boys club environment? This is the last question. I'm sending it off with this one. This is it. Dr. Parham is waiting for me to bring him on, but
I think, I can't remember who said the quote. A couple things come to mind. Just a Carson girl that did good. Sports was, a way for me to find my voice. And I've had mentors, both male and female mentors who said, when you have a seat at the table, if you have an opportunity to have a seat at the table and there's no chair, bring a chair. But once you get there, just speak up and make sure that you're well informed about, the topic and the work that you're doing. So it's that hard. It's like you as an Olympic athlete, right? You put in the hard work. I think Dr. Parham made that same comment. You put in the hard work. It's that 4 a.m. so that when that opportunity presents itself, you're there. I do have to say, just one final thought is I had a little bit of a, what do you call it, extra training, because I was a military police officer in the U.S. Army. So, I've really worked in some boys clubs that, if you don't speak up in the military, you'll get overrun. So a little bit of a head start that I think most women don't have the opportunity to experience. But, when you get a seat at the table, be prepared and speak up when you have that opportunity.
All right, Laura, there it is. She said it for you. When you get a seat at the table, bring your own chair.
Bring your A game. Bring your A game.
Bring your A game all the time. Thank you so much for joining us today. I am going to kick it back to President Thomas Parham. Thank you so much for having me. I'm always Cal State Dominguez Hills alum, fastest woman, doctorate, anything for Cal State Dominguez Hills, I'm always on board. I appreciate you so much, President. I appreciate the panel for allowing me to moderate the panel. Thank you so much for making my job easy. All right, Dr. President, let's go.
Thank you, Carmelita, and wonderful to see you again, and wonderful job. I want everybody on the call today to please join me in, first of all, thanking Bill Allen and Shane Cullen and the whole LAEDC team for hosting this along with us and allowing us to really partner with them to sponsor this forum. What a remarkable space. I want to thank Kevin Demhoff from the Rams and Russ Simons from their comments and work today. I mean, that was so powerful. And really Mike Keenan and David Siegel and Renata for being there, and Russ as well for their comments today on the panel. I think it was very informative. I think there's several takeaways I think that I see as we think about the closing remarks. First is that opportunities, ladies and gentlemen, will be abundant, but we want to simply not entertain people, but use these opportunities to empower communities, because what sports does is it provides opportunities for business and job growth. And so that is certainly aligned with the mission of the LAEDC. So we are certainly supportive of that. I think we heard a lot of that today. I think the second takeaway for me is that it is important for our LA sports teams to not simply be in the community, but of the community. Let me say that again. We've heard everybody talk about the fact that they want to be of the community, not simply in the community, which means they have to develop strategic engagement with a whole range of community entities, including schools and parks and cities and universities and other places around. That is real important. And I think that is important for us to be able to create the conditions for young people to succeed and for them to learn to expand their range of choices and options and what they were considering, not just in terms of a job, but also a career. I think it's also a flattering piece, and I appreciate it very much, for universities like the California State University of Dominguez Hills, or for our CSU5 that include Long Beach, it includes Northridge, it includes Cal State LA, and it includes Cal Poly Pomona. Our CSU5 have demographic representation to help outfit and train the employees that all of these sports endeavors will require and need going forward in the future. And so whether you're thinking about sports marketing and management, whether you think about arena operations, whether you think about data analytics, whether you think about culinary and hospitality, all of those are needs that we can meet as a particular set of educational institutions here that are part of the California State University system, which, by the way, is the largest system of public higher education in all of America. Also, I think there was a comment we can't mention about the esports, but I want folk to remember, at least at California State University Dominguez Hills, we are in the process of trying to start our own esports program and see if we can solicit sponsors for that piece. But for us, esports is not an outcome, it is a strategy. Let me say that again. Esports for us will be an outcome, right? Not just, but a strategy to be able to get students to do that, because the hard and soft skills that these young people and senior adults learn from playing esports are in fact directly transferable assets to help students better manage the rigors of a university education. And that is part of the trick to be able to help them succeed in greater numbers. So we look forward to being able to partner with that. And I'm hoping between Sophie Stadium, between the new Clippers Arena, between all the other venues that are going on in the area, that we want to make sure that we are partnering with our education institutions in the area to make sure that we can do some of that work and make it important for all of us. So for Bill Allen, for the entire LAEDC, for all of us who've been with you today, we thank you for being with us. We thank you for being a part of this particular Future Forum on the future of LA sports. I hope you're as excited as I am about what's to come. And as a proud Angelino, as someone who lives and breathes the sports community, we look forward to many prosperous years to come in not only empowering our entertainment with sports, but also empowering our business community as well. With that, I'll stop and say it's been my pleasure. I am Dr. Thomas Parham, the president of California State University, Dominguez Hills, a proud partner with LAEDC. We thank you for being here. Good afternoon and take care.
You are watching DHTV from California State University, Dominguez Hills.